Yes, once again, this is your host, Alvin Ekwang from Infotesters Limited. We are a due diligence company. We are a private investigations company. And we are glad to host you during this webinar, which we normally host on a monthly basis. And today we have 3 hosts, but currently we are joined by 2 who shall introduce themselves. We have Herbert and Elliot, who will introduce themselves later on. But today's webinar is on how to detect fraud indicators in your business. We realize that fraud is a vice that can eat up a business if it's not dealt with and if it's not detected. And so today we shall go through certain things that we need to do and which we need to put in place such that we are able to see that certain these vices are creeping up, or they are already in place, or we should be able to see to it that we detect them and therefore be in a good position to prevent it. Yes, so Elliot, could you just introduce yourself briefly, and then I will also need you to briefly define for us what fraud is, and maybe in your definition you can try to differentiate it with, from maybe like an ordinary theft.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Alvin. I'm Elliot Atwongire. I work with Equity Bank as a relationship officer, digital bank, and I'm also an upcoming forensic investigator. It's my pleasure being part of this and being here today with you. So today, basically, as you've already told the audience, and on the topic that we're going to discuss about, we are looking on fraud, which is a deliberate act with it's a deliberate act with the intention of obtaining an unauthorized benefit, either for oneself or for an institution. That's how I can relate. And we have many examples of fraud. I can give a few like identity theft, hacking, is this. Over to you, Alvin.
Okay, thank you so much. And so in your line of work, and maybe if you'd help a business, what do you think is the appropriate way that someone can commit fraud? The ways in which someone can commit fraud?
Well, I will maybe link this with a fraud triangle, whereby we have in which a person can commit fraud. Have pressure, we have opportunity, and rationalization. If under pressure, find someone is pressurized to do fraud. I can be here at work, but I have things that are putting me on pressure. They are forcing me to maybe look for money, raise a certain amount of money. So I'll be forced to do fraud. It can be addiction, it can be divorce, it can be family pressure. I'm on pressure, I want to achieve certain goals, and I don't have money. So I'll be forced to do fraud, or in any way I look for money. We have opportunity. This I'll bring it down in an example. Let's say an organization, they have weak controls, internal controls. So if I look around and I'm like, well, I can get this money, everyone notice that I've taken the money or a certain kind of information. So this is also fraud. in many ways, you find people who do fraud. It starts from opportunity. Do you have an opportunity to do that fraud? After doing it, are they going to get you? So most of the time, you find people are pushed by the weak internal controls. Then rationalization. After doing fraud, what is going to happen? Are they going to get me? Or if fraud has ever happened in an organization, did they get that person? So people look at the history of different kinds of fraud that have been taking place, and you find the organization wasn't able to get the perpetrators. So I'll also be forced to do fraud, and maybe with something in my mind that even if I do that fraud, they won't be able to get me. So I'll be forced to continue doing fraud. That's how I can bring it over to you, Andrew. Sorry, Alvin.
Yes, Herbert. I just wanted maybe, can you give some addition to what Elliot has given to us in terms of what fraud is and how can one commit fraud? I know he has mentioned something about the fraud triangle, which was it's been credited to a certain gentleman called Donald Tracy. So I just needed you to just highlight a little bit, and then we'll move on from there in terms of what and how do people commit fraud.
Basically, Elliot has exhausted most of the reasons and justifications as to why people commit fraud. Do you hear me? Am I clear? Because I can't get to hear back. Alvin?
I can hear you. Can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay, I can hear you. Yes. So I was saying, Elliot has exhausted most of the aspects that entail fraud and the circumstances that lead to one to engage into fraud. And as you have said, there are basically three of them, which he has already elaborated. I don't know if I need to really go much into that. However, I will dwell on rationalization, which, as he was trying to explain, I think maybe he didn't clearly bring it out. But under rationalization, this is where someone kind of justifies their behavior as to why they are committing fraud or behaving in a certain way. I'll give an example of a student who may blame their teacher for poor exams and say that maybe the instructor hates them, something like that. So in these circumstances, someone rationalizes fraud by simply saying that it's because maybe people don't like him in the company, or because he has been promoted and people are hating on him. So something that they use to justify the situation that is at hand and give a different interpretation from what is actually going on. So most likely, most of these perpetrators of fraud are people who are in positions of managerial positions, people who are like executives, people who own businesses and experts, basically people who are highly skilled, who are put in places of responsibility where there is a kind of expectation in terms of accounting, finances, and bookkeeping, things like that. So those are most likely the people that are going to commit fraud.
Okay, thank you so much. As I bring in Elliot, Albert has taken us through the rationalization where someone is able to really justify as to why they are really committing. It's been it's been researched and found out that actually most people who commit fraud are not, basically they don't take themselves as in hardcore criminals. They take themselves as someone who is honest, as someone who doesn't have a criminal history. And so when they begin to commit fraud, so that's why we normally say that that the people actually who commit fraud are mostly first timers. And that is why we are putting in these webinars to speak to the people that own businesses and that work within businesses, that really anyone is most likely to commit fraud. And so I wanted to know from you, Elliot, in terms of fraud awareness, how would you look at fraud awareness as an important tool in order to detect what fraud is and what fraud is taking place within an organization?
Well, thank you, Alvin, for that wonderful question. You're asking about when fraud takes place, or if it has not yet happened, but then we come in with our awareness campaigns. How does it help an organization? Then this takes us back to things that happen, or the effects of fraud when it takes place. First of all, if it's an organization or if it's any business, they will lose money, because we have to include in investigators looking for the fraudsters. Again, the reputation for that business to the public. So another thing, it will even encourage the regulators to come in, find out why this is happening to any organization that is being regulated. Let me give you an example. If it is a bank, that means Bank of Uganda will be forced to come in and maybe check all that. It will affect the organization. So if we try to do the awareness here and there is all kinds of platforms, or even within the organization, it will help those organizations or businesses to stay away from those negativities that would have happened. First of all, the organization or business won't lose money. The reputation will be maintained. Market, even it could also affect the market or the clients that the business is having. So if there is awareness, that means people within able to move on with the organizational goals and maybe achieve them, minus being interrupted with fraud, scams, and whatever. So this with the awareness, it will help different kinds of businesses move on with steady, fast development, where fraud could
Elliot, your bandwidth is a bit low.
Oh, sorry, okay. Sorry about.
So the audio is not coming out a little bit well. Okay, I just pause on a little bit. I wanted to get to Herbert. I just wanted to confirm. Daniel, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clearly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for joining. I wanted to inquire from you. In terms of you've had Elliot speak about fraud awareness. I wanted to hear your part in terms of this fraud awareness, because we have been in certain institutions where we've realized that if an organization is able to handle fraud awareness well, for example, if they're able to speak to their employees and then meet them on either on a regular basis or they just do a spot check or something like that, they're able to speak to their employees to show them, like Elliot has put it, the effects of fraud. So I needed to understand from you what could be the effects of fraud, because if the organizations, if the employees are able to understand how fraud is able to affect them, then most likely they are not going to engage themselves in this act. So I needed to get your mind on in terms of the effects of fraud. Daniel.
Yes, Alvin, thank you very much for having me on this platform. And I would first of all like to apologize for signing in late because I had a technical glitch here and there. But if I'm to launch myself into your question, I will start from a very strong standpoint. That is, in the recent years, we have seen fraud being perpetrated in almost every organization. And it would be naive for managers in organizations actually to take the matter lightly, because we have seen several organizations actually becoming victims of fraud, and the impact is very drastic. If we give an example of what happened to MTN some years back, where several employees were indicted and prosecuted because of the internal fraud that they orchestrated against their employer, that's MTN, was quite massive, a tune of up to about 10 billion Ugandan shillings. That is an equivalent of 3.4 million US dollars, was actually siphoned inside MTN itself. And if you imagine how this happened, it was orchestrated in such a way that they were able to take advantage of the weak internal controls that were available for them to exploit in MTN, and they created the e-money, which e-money was actually being withdrawn by unsuspecting customers, of course, in collusion with those who were involved in this. And when MTN went to check its bank balance, that is at Stanbic Bank, it was not matching, because if you do internal controls, you have to also do, daily reconciliation. So their figures were not matching. And the same thing also happened sometime back in Rwanda, where Tigo Telecom in Rwanda lost about 170,000 US dollars. That's approximately 492 Rwandan francs. So fraud, the effects of fraud are very drastic on business. But one other thing also to mention is that the individuals themselves also put the company reputation at risk. They themselves, they're also at risk of prosecution, but also they put the socio-economic well-being of the country at stake. So fraud awareness is really key in any kind of institution, profit or not for profit. Alvin.
Okay, thank you so much. I wanted just to add something, because we realize when we are doing fraud awareness, there is a way we ask the employees to report fraud. I just needed your mind on how fraud can be reported in an organization in terms of certain things. Albert, can you hear me? Albert, unmute. Albert, you are still muted.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yes. Fraud is basically a criminal act, and as it's well known, those are matters that are under the care of the police, and therefore, if at all fraud has been detected, it is prudent that it's immediately reported. However, for purposes of in consideration of the fact that this is employment, there would be need to first of all establish internal reporting measures for purposes of having channels through which fraud can be reported. And by experience, it's very prudent that such channels are in a way discreet, such as to encourage members to come out and disclose whatever circumstances and instances of fraud that have arisen. Therefore, it's very important that these procedures and processes are well articulated and communicated to the employees or the staff of whichever organization or company it is. Because in absence of such well-known processes and measures, or rather procedures, it becomes very impracticable for an employee, especially those that are very timid or that are in fear of their positions or reporting, whatever it may be, because in most cases you find it's the bosses, and it's now a minor or a mere supervisor who is identifying instances of fraud. And in such cases, if at all there are no well-known reporting processes and procedures, and also having such processes in place that are well discreet in such a way that they protect what would, in other words, call protection, witness protection, it becomes very hard to fight fraud. So it's very important, first of all, have internal systems, and eventually, if those systems fail to curb the fraud, it's important that such fraud is reported to police, because now it becomes a very unpleasant event or activity within a business or company, which can ultimately lead to the collapse of the business organization. So first, it's important that you have internal reporting systems to which you report, and investigations are conducted, or rather disciplinary measures are taken. And in the event that they fail, number two, it's important that you report such instances to police. So for me, those are the most, the two pertinent measures that's been placed.
Okay, thank you so much, Albert. Yes, you've touched something important there, because fraud is, there should be internal systems of managing fraud, but also it should also be reported to other authorities, like you mentioned, police, such that it is captured. Because when organizations keep fraud within themselves, and maybe they do internal disciplines, disciplinary procedures, and maybe they send away the employee and they have not reported, it creates another problem for another organization, and so the ripple effect will still continue. Elliot, I wanted to get to you. Elliot, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
I wanted to hear your mind on the ways of preventing fraud.
Okay.
Just highlight for me.
All right. Thank you, Alvin. Well, first of all, as you know, during this COVID period, fraud cases have really increased. The reason being, there's been people have been seated at home doing nothing. And another thing is free internet access almost everywhere. I'll go in my home village, sit on my phone, do everything that I can do. So how can we prevent fraud? First of all, through employee awareness, fraud awareness. I'll give you an example in where I'm working from, or even these other telecom companies. You get random messages. Please do not share your mobile PIN or something like that. So through that, it will help the public or the customers or clients for different businesses to stay away from fraud. Then another thing we need to address, we need to communicate to our people, or again get to know who our customers are. Through that, we'll be able to control fraud. So if I'm having a business and I know my customers, let's say you, Alvin, I know that you're my client, you're doing this, you're doing this, you usually do this kind of orders, and your information. So all that information can be used by any other person, or let's say like hackers. So we need to protect our clients. Through that, we'll be able to control fraud. Another thing is basically through awareness. We need to educate people on the effects of fraud. When it happens, what are the effects, or what can it lead to? So we need to educate people so that they get to know this can happen, or it can danger, and through that kind, and it will help different businesses to prosper. Then another thing, companies should ensure that the internal controls are in place and operating effectively to reduce the opportunity to commit fraud. So I'll give you an example. It's I'm like where I'm working from. If
Elliot, your audio is breaking. Elliot,
we can be able to prevent fraud and
okay, how about let me catch your mind.
Am I audible?
Yes, I'll get back to you, Elliot. Abad, just help me do a recap on how.
Yes, please. Am I audible enough?
Okay, just Elliot, I'll come back to you. Let me first.
Can you hear me?
I'll get back to you, Elliot. I'll get back to you. Abad, just also give us just a small recap on how organizations can prevent fraud. Abad, can you unmute?
Sorry, I was saying.
Yes.
In the interest of avoiding repetition, what exactly Elliot has been deliberating on, I will just highlight briefly, probably.
Yes.
Here and there. So organizations or companies can prevent fraud by implementing a few rather very basic measures and putting in place a preventive and identifying factors or matters that can be properly established. For example, there are instances where you find one person is exercising different roles in a company or organization. Let's give an example. One is an administrator, is the one who is balancing the books, is the one who is recording the data, making the entries, banking the money, and later on making the financial reports. So in such instances, it takes us back to the other circumstances that Elliot earlier shared with us of pressure, opportunity, and rationalization. So if a person has all those roles and they are placed in a situation where, let's say, one is very broke, is facing financial difficulties, and he has aspirations of, let's say, driving a modern car, and yet is exposed to such opportunities of accessing money on a daily basis or throughout the year. And given even the fact that such persons most times who commit fraud are not persons who are new in an office. These are people who have a long period of stay in a company, which is a very important factor for crime or fraud to exist is a person knows the systems, he knows where the loopholes are, the gaps, and therefore he can take advantage and know also how to cover it up. So that means that he has all the three factors to enable him to commit the fraud. So you find that it's very important to make sure that you segregate duties. For example, by ensuring in the position, let's say as a manager, there can be someone maybe like an assistant or a deputy with whom they perform those roles. So it becomes difficult because at the end of the day, if I'm to make a report and Mr. Joshua is the next person I'm supposed to submit that report to, who also has to internalize, look at it before it is finally submitted, it becomes very, very difficult for the person to commit fraud because they are aware that the other person may not let it go unnoticed. So that is the first step. The next is to know your employees. This goes down to the initial stage at which when you employ someone, you need to do background checkups, due diligence. And at this level, I want to encourage companies to take the initiative. And I think of late, you realize that companies are now using recruitment firms because they have the time to go out there and do the due diligence background checks on different employees and make sure the employees that they've outsourced are people of integrity and people who they believe that will serve for the interest of their recruitment companies. Because no one wants to recommend employees that are going to tarnish the very reason as why their business exists. So you need to know your employees, the people you recruit. The next is to maintain internal controls, like I earlier intimated. If you have internal controls in place and they are well known, it becomes also difficult because, you know, for a fraud to exist, someone has knowledge that there are no control measures. There is no one who will do the checks here and there, the audits. So someone who will do the abrupt book counting and bookkeeping. So if you don't have such control measures in place, and you make sure they're as random as possible. So it also communicates to whoever may intend to commit fraud that now it's likely that you're going to be caught. And you know, for fraud, if a person knows that at the back of their mind, it becomes very difficult for them to outsmart or rather calculate ways of committing the fraud, because at the end of the day, they are going to now assess the circumstances and the risks that come with it. The next is to scrutinize business bank accounts. Now, most times you find they are, like, for example, let me give a bank that has managers who access individuals' accounts. They can basically they have the power to do whatever it takes to do what they want and what they will with people's finances. Even in an office, you realize that if a person is exposed to accessing bank accounts and he has the signatures, if you don't create measures that can show that person that actually there are ways in which, if at all you withdrew money, it can be noticed. So, for example, a company organization can enroll for online banking services, whereby if at all any activity takes place in regard to your bank account, the notification is especially sent to your respective phones or emails, notifying you of such activity. So if a person knows that such establishments are in place, it becomes difficult as well. And there's also like what I talked about, you know, here when you're dealing with finances, you have to make sure audits are regular. You don't do audits this year, next year you don't do, the other day you don't do, or you only do it when maybe you need funds. For example, for NGOs, when you need now donor funds or you want to bid for certain services, then you call auditors to come and audit your firm. And in this particular aspect, it also it seeks the initiative of the employer or the organization to be as honest as possible to themselves, if at all the interest is for the benefit of their business, to engage auditors and not direct them on how to audit the company or organization. Because what happens in practice is people will go and get auditors who are going to do favors and give them audit reports that are good for their business. So here it calls for being very honest and as open-minded and transparent as possible. And then also you need to train your employees or staff or whichever persons are within that organization or company to understand fraud, the circumstances that can lead someone to commit fraud. In other words, you give them the how should I call it? You empower them and make them aware of factors. They may be demographic, such as someone's known financial situations. They can be able to identify that such and such a person should be engaging in fraud. For example, if you identify that a person who maybe is earning 200,000 is now driving a Prado. So if you don't train people to identify, of course, obviously, a person will know, this person earns this much money, but how come they attain this vehicle which costs 10 years for someone to buy? So if you don't create that kind of awareness, the person to know that, one, these are the processes through which you can report fraud. Secondly, that if such and such an instance happens, possibly it calls for you to be alert and start observing such a person. For example, you may find instances where a certain employee never takes leave for the whole year. They remain in office. Even when you suggest that, please, Herbert, go for leave, you find that such employees are not willing. Actually, will tell you, I'm okay. So if you find such instances, you should be able to now dig deep. But you can only dig deep if only you are aware and you've been trained on how to analyze things. And this also goes to engaging a person like a fraud examiner or some certain employee in the organization that whose role is to specifically carry on that obligation. Otherwise, an ordinary person like me, if I was to be in an organization exercising my role and also engaging in other people's business, it might be taken that this person is certain things that do not concern him. So it is important to be as professional as possible for companies and organizations to employ such assets to help organizations prevent fraud. Then the other issue is establishing, basically protecting your credit card information. You realize that, especially for people who have had the opportunity to engage in online purchases, these services that you see an item, or rather you want to make a procurement and you pay through online, They'll ask you for your credentials and bank accounts, PIN, and what have you. So you realize that if you just generously give out such information, you're subjecting yourself to these scams and the frauds. And therefore, it's very important to ensure that you protect these passcodes and numbers from just being easily accessed by anyone. Because if the person accessed it, let's say I'm the bank manager and my supervisor access that PIN or access code, it means that they can use it without my knowledge. And at the end of the day, being that it's only me who will be known as a person who is the customer of such secretive PINs and passcodes, it becomes obvious that I will be the target as the person who committed the fraud. So it is very important that people who are in charge of such delicate information to protect it. Then the other thing is to know your business partners. You find that most, especially today's generation, we are very open to taking initiatives or making initiatives to start businesses or start up companies who have been fortunate enough to make fortunes. You find that they're very easily gullible in terms of online business. For us who are in the profession of advocate, defending and fighting for the rights of the violated, you find that for business scams, most these days there are very many people who go and order for things online and call themselves whatever companies they are, purporting to be registered. And therefore, if you find that you engage into a business with such a person and you say, okay, it's now fine, I'll be your partner in Uganda, whichever country it is, I'll be sending you items and you sell on my behalf. So you need to be very careful the people you engage with as a company or an organization, because if you don't do that, you're subjecting or opening up yourself to people who are going to get detailed information about your company and use it against you. Or, for example, they may join your company and use it for other illegal activities, and eventually you find your company either being wound up for participating or engaging in illegal activities. So it's very important that you do this,
Okay.
you know your business partners.
Okay, how about I just need to just hold on a moment there. Daniel, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Alvin.
Okay, so I believe you have been listening to submission that Herbert has given and also Elliot has been giving. These are pertinent things. I just need to speak to our audience in attendance. In case you have a question, you can just type in the comment section there and we see how to go about it. Because you realize what you are looking at here today in a broader sense and also narrowing is prevention and detection of fraud. But I wanted to capture your mind, Daniel, on because I know Herbert has mentioned some of them, because if we are not equipped or if we don't equip our managers, our business owners, and also the employees with knowledge on how to detect fraud, it may slip in between their hands, and by the time they detect it, I shall have caused too many bad repercussions. I just needed to get from you what are the red flags that that people should be on the watch out, both employees, company owners, and also the managers. I just needed you to capture that just in terms of highlights.
Yes, Alvin, I started this conversation by mentioning the fact that fraud is complex, okay? And because of this complexity, we have to appreciate that it manifests itself in various forms, and it also has its own typologies. But when we are looking at business in itself, one of the easiest ways probably business owners or managers can do in order to identify the so-called red flags Okay, and what is a red flag for starters? So these are, you may call them indicators. Okay, it's something that raises your eyebrows, and you come to realization that actually something may be going wrong. Okay, and in this sense, we need to classify red flags into categories, by the way, which I think makes it easier for managers and business owners, even employees, to identify some of these red flags. And the first, I would categorize it as operational red flags. And when we talk about operational red flags, we are looking at it at both individual and organizational level. And what do we mean by operational red flags? So these are indicators which are mainly concerned with how business is run, the operations, the daily operations of business. See, now the daily operations of business, we have individuals who are employees who actually run these operations on behalf of the organization, but we also have at the organization level the things that the organization must do, which are still run by the same employees. Okay, so the organization in itself does not do this and that. It's employees who run these operations on behalf of the organization. So what are some of the operational red flags that we can look at the individual level? And I'm glad that Herbert has actually mentioned quite a number of them. So I'm just going to just rabble through. And if you look at the operational red flag at the individual level, you'll find sometimes unwillingness to share duties, because you find some employees, you find that the duties and responsibilities might cut across different departments, but you find one department is unwilling to share duties with another, yet they have to sync their work. Then the other is unwillingness to take leave, because we know it's part of the organization.
Daniel, you're breaking.
That individuals must actually take leave when their time is due, but some of them don't want to take leave. We remember one of
Daniel, I'm not. We have lost you. Just confirm when you're back on. I wanted to get to Elliot. Elliot, can you hear me?
Yes, Alvin, I can hear you.
Okay, I just needed you to have your closing remarks, and maybe as you close, I needed to capture your mind. Maybe if it could be noise, and maybe speak something about the fraud policy, because I believe every organization should have a fraud policy and what could be in it. And it's the same question I'll also ask Herbert to deal with in his closing remarks.
All right, Alvin, thank you for that. I hope I'm audible enough.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I want to thank each and sorry.
We can hear you.
Oh, sure. I want to thank each and every one of you being part of this. As you're all aware, fraud, me, you, or anyone else who can be victims of fraud. So all we have to do is continue spreading the awareness, and we shall prosper with our businesses and daily endeavors. So I'll have to encourage everyone who has been part of this to go and spread the awareness wherever they will be going and everything they will be doing. With that, it will help us to reduce the fraud rates. I know we didn't have many attenders. People have attended the webinar, but with these numbers, we can reach out to other people that we are working with, or people that we meet on a daily basis. All we have to do is to keep on spreading the awareness, because with fraud, I know we can really lose a lot. People have lost a lot of things, businesses, reputation, just because of fraud. I think those are my remarks. I just want to thank Infotesters for giving me this opportunity to be part of this, and I believe together we can end fraud. I thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, but don't yet leave. I needed Herbert. I just needed to capture something for us in terms of fraud policy, and also give your closing remarks. Then after that, I'll get back to Daniel also to give his closing remarks, and then we'll continue. Herbert, can you give us something on the fraud policy?
Thank you, Alvin. I will capture it as well in my closing remarks, because it's something that I should conclude with. First, in order to deal with fraud, you need to report it as soon as it has happened. And also, it's very vital that steps are taken to ensure that whatever has been dishonestly taken is immediately recovered. This is very important because with the people who are fraudulent, if they realize that whatever fraud happens, or whenever fraud happens, there is no step that is taken to recover such sums, it becomes something that is enticing to someone else to actually engage in activities of fraud. So therefore, it's important to ensure that you report immediately and steps are seriously taken to ensure that you recover. This acts as a deterrent measure against fraud, for fear that someone will know that eventually that amount will be recovered and there will be no. Secondly, it is not prudent to ignore cases that are reported, irrespective of, regardless of the size or the level of seriousness. So whether small or big, once reported, make sure you investigate it seriously. So in other words, you treat every reported case of fraud seriously. So it sends a signal that there is nothing that is going to be taken lightly. Thirdly, it's important, especially for institutions, companies, and organizations, to take due diligence and background checks seriously. You get to know who you're employing, who you're engaging with as a partner. So don't ignore this vital aspect in fighting and preventing fraud. Lastly, I will speak into the issue of the fraud policy. Fraud policy is a very important and vital document or policy that needs to be put in place for all institutions, organizations, and companies. For one reason, a fraud policy helps the company strongly communicate their position in respect to fraud and how they are going to deal with such instances of fraud. Therefore, it sends the tone, it communicates the tone of the employer to whoever they've subjected or placed in positions of power or decision-making, that there is a policy in place, and therefore, if at all you commit fraud, ABCD will happen. So it is very prudent that even if you have a fraud policy, it must fit into a few, or rather very vital, important elements, must suit or must be met by that kind of fraud policy. One is it must be simple. In other words, it should be something that everyone will be able to understand and avoid instances of one claiming that they did not understand the policy. Secondly, it may be simple, but ensure that it's well communicated. In other words, if you have it as simple as possible and you keep it within yourselves, that as the employers and managers and the employees do not understand the context they are in, then it becomes useless. So the policy must be well communicated. It must be focused. In other words, it should clearly state and show what it's intended to fight and the penalties or repercussions that follow. And lastly, it should be a policy that people understand, have been trained on, appreciate the importance, and therefore are willing to ensure that it's implemented. With those few remarks or deliberations, I thank you, Alvin, for giving me the opportunity to participate in this webinar discussion. I beg to close with those few submissions.
Okay, thank you so much, Herbert, for those deliberations. Don't yet leave. I needed to have also the closing remarks from Daniel. Daniel, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I can hear you loud.
Yes, I know you are not yet completed what you are submitting. Can you complete it and then also give your final remarks, and then we shall close.
Okay, Alvin, I was still talking about operational red flags, and I think I was able to capture it at the individual level. Though at the organizational level, what are some of the things that an organization can look for in terms of red flags? And here we are talking about operational red flags at the organizational level. Examples are missing documents. And remember, documents are very vital for an organization. So you find situations where there are missing documents, there's excessive inventory shrinkage, there are multiple payments given out to service providers and all that. There are also excessive number of adjusted entries. So you see, these are all potential red flags which are at an operational level, which the organization can actually look at. Then the other is behavioral red flags. And I still take cognizance that Herbert was able to mention quite a number of them. For instance, living beyond one's means or lifestyle changes. Someone who has an attitude of what one would call a wheeler dealer attitude. This is a type of attitude whereby someone espouses this kind of shrewdness in terms of, operating some business deals here and there, which of course some executives would definitely like, because they see the person as, a go-getter, one who is bringing business, but definitely such people can also turn out to be very fatal for your business. In closing my remarks, I would like to point out and stress to the fact that we may talk about controlling internal fraud, but we shouldn't forget that external fraud also exists, though companies mostly they should also on external fraud. But in conclusion, companies above all should establish or incorporate fraud examination as a core business component, not just a reactionary attitude, because this is seen in most businesses. They wait for fraud to happen, then finally they bring fraud examiners when the damage has already been done. But if it is incorporated in several policies, including HR policies, And Herbert mentioned due diligence, background checks, and all that. So a core business component which seeks to address fraud both internally and externally should be adopted as part of the lifeline of business operations. I beg to end my submissions there. Alvin, thank you.
Thank you so much for those deliberations. Thank you so much for those deliberations from all our panelists, and for the people who have been with us today. We have had Daniel Adyera, who has just finished speaking, is the acting head of crime department, forensics and investigative sciences at King Ceasor University, and also we have had Arinda Herbert, who is the senior associate at Cymbell Advocates. And then also we have had Elliot Atwongire, who is the relationship officer, digital banking at Equity Bank Limited. And I've not seen any this record. This webinar has been recorded, and in case someone wants to share it and revisit it, it will be on the Infotesters Limited Facebook page, but as well as we can send a link, or it's as well on YouTube. But it's also important for us to realize that in terms of fighting fraud, private companies like Infotesters Limited have certain systems and people in place that these organizations, your company, can contact us, and we shall be able to give an awareness to your employees such that people are able to know the red flags in terms of the fraud triangle that my colleagues have spoken about, such that we are able to curb fraud before it happens. And in case it happens, we are also able to mitigate such that we don't continue to have such risks as a business. Otherwise, my thanks goes to the hosts, rather to the panelists, for being able to give us their time, and also to everyone that has attended. I thank you so much for giving us this time, and we consider this webinar closed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.